this guy's garage. Like and subscribe. This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
So we are under committee business. I saw hands go up. First, Mr. Barrett, Ms. Khalid, and then Mr. Fisher. Go ahead, Mr.
Point of order.
Barrett. Go
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
ahead on your point of order, Mr. Housefather.
My point of order is my understanding under the rules, Mr. Chair, is that the motion for Mr. Baines being a privileged motion supersedes any other motion before the committee. And we should be returning now to Mr. Baines' privileged motion, who agreed to allow a meeting to happen when I don't think he had to on Tuesday without going through his privileged motion. So, Mr. Chair, my belief is you should come to Mr. Baines.
Okay, so as I explained in the last meeting, Mr. Housefather, when we left the meeting was adjourned, therefore debate was adjourned. So when a member has the floor, they can move the appropriate motion if they want to resume debate. And so that's where, I mentioned that in the last meeting, and that's where we're going to start off today. Now, I've acknowledged that Mr. Barrett has the floor. When a member, perhaps Mr. Baines, has the floor and he wants to move a motion to resume debate, he can certainly do that at that time, Mr. Housefather. So,
Mr. Chair, I also have a point of order.
Okay, go ahead on your point of order, Ms. Khalid.
I had let you know before the committee had started that I would like to be first on the list, and I'm not sure why you didn't recognize me first. I would appreciate if you would recognize me first.
We've been through this before where hands have gone up pre-meeting. As soon as the gavel drops, I saw Mr. Barrett's hand go up first, then I saw you, and I saw Mr. Fisher. So.
You knew that I had.
But the meeting hadn't started at that point, Ms. Khalid.
But you knew, Chair.
I mean, you can contact me at 8 o'clock this morning and tell me that you want the floor, but until that gavel drops and I acknowledge who has the floor, it doesn't work that way. So Mr. Barrett has the floor. Go ahead, Mr. Green. I'm still on Ms. Khalid's point of order. So Mr. Barrett had the floor as determined by me when the meeting started and the gavel dropped. So I'm going to continue with that. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
I'd like to challenge your ruling on that, Chair.
Okay, so we've got a challenge of the ruling on the list of the speakers. So it's a dilatory motion. Do we have consensus to challenge who the speaking list is going to be? Okay, we don't. So, Madam Clerk, if you want to take the roll, I would appreciate that. Thank you. So just to be clear, the challenge is who has the floor. And Ms. Khalid, I'm assuming that you're challenging that you had the floor before Mr. Barrett, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that's certainly not the way that I saw it, but we will go to the vote. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
So the motion is that Ms. Khalid has the floor. Mr. Baines.
Yes.
No.
You said the motion is that she has the floor.
What is the motion?
You said the motion is she has the floor.
Hang on. So the motion is, shall the chair, so the motion is that I acknowledge Mr. Barrett at the beginning, and that Ms. Khalid has challenged that, so that...
Why are you arguing if you agree with the clerk?
Okay.
That's how we voted.
Hang on a sec, Mr. Barrett. Just give me a second here.
What's that answer?
Just give me a second, please.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order.
Okay. No. Look it.
Point of order, Chair.
Parm voted for ICRA to have the floor. Why are you arguing? He voted for ICRA to have...
So just to recap, when the meeting started, I did identify Mr. Barrett as having his hand raised first and moved to him on the floor. And then I had Ms. Khalid and Mr. Fisher following Mr. Barrett's intervention. Ms. Khalid challenged the ruling of the chair. The difficulty in challenging the ruling of the chair is that the ability of the chair to identify, with the help of the clerk, whose members have their hands raised first is a very subjective matter. So the difficulty as well is in challenging the chair on what is effectively not a rule or a procedure, but a very subjective matter. Really forces less discretion for the chair and the clerk to do their job in identifying which members are to speak. So I did identify Mr. Barrett. There is nothing to be challenged in that regard.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Green.
I'll take responsibility for the fact that I'm tuning in here virtually, but I do want to note that I did want to intervene on behalf of Mr. Housefather's point of order. I wasn't given that opportunity. Things rolled pretty quickly and then devolved even faster. So I am hoping that I do have the opportunity to also contribute to Mr. Housefather's point of order.
Right. So I appreciate that, Mr. Green. Just give me a second here, because the problem that we have is that the challenge is that the floor wasn't given to Mr. Barrett, which it was. So I'm not sure, even if we were to move to a challenge of the chair, who would have the floor next, because we could devolve into a situation where we have continuous challenges of the chair on who has the speaking order, and so that's the risk we run here. But I'm prepared to play the game if everybody wants to play this game. Mr. Green, I am going to go to you on your point of order, sir. Go ahead.
I do appreciate that, and I'll say, maybe to back off some of the partisanship, I think given the best of your abilities, you do the best that you can in this committee. I do disagree with you from time to time, but I do not think that you're overly partisan. I would say that on the point of order regarding privilege, I wanted to go on the record on that point of order, which was the order raised by Mr. Housefather before things moved rather quickly, sir. And the reason is because in your ruling, you ruled that this committee was not the adequate committee for you to be able to rule on that point of privilege, that indeed it did have to go to the House. And for that reason, and given the seriousness of both the allegations that were made against Mr. Baines, and given the seriousness of what I consider to be our parliamentary privileges, while I am not in a position to opine on whether or not a line was crossed, I certainly think that it was broached. It was right up against that line. And for that reason, I am in full support of seeing that motion of privilege go to the Speaker for consideration. And what I'm not interested in is devolving into a game of shotgun in terms of who sees who's first as it relates to our speakers list. I don't think procedurally that will get us anywhere. And I think that as a committee, we've done the best that we can to move through this. And so, again, we do have, through our standing orders, the ability to participate virtually. I'm doing that here today. I'm glad I am, because I don't want to be caught up in what's happening there. But having said that, procedurally, I feel that I didn't get a chance to contribute to Mr. Housefather's point prior to everything going off the rails. And I would say, just in closing, sir, I won't take up more of your time, that I would not support a challenge on who saw who first, because for the points that you've raised, I think it's a very objective thing. But I would be willing to challenge who should have precedence procedurally in this meeting today as it relates to Mr. Baines. And that's what I wanted to put forward to the members there, and hope that you can take with seriousness the allegations on the point of privilege that Mr. Baines has raised and Mr. Housefather, I think, has rightly provided to you in terms of precedence of order for this particular meeting. Thank you. Okay, I appreciate that intervention, Mr. Green, and just for the benefit of the committee, and I appreciate your support on challenging the subjectivity of the chair and the clerk's responsibility to identify those who are deemed to be able to speak
That is one of the difficulties about being a chair, is figuring out, there's hands go up and people, I've seen people literally throw their bodies across the table to try to get the attention of the chair. So it is rather difficult. I will say that there are other avenues that members can take through motions to be heard if they choose to, and that's not necessarily challenging the chair. It's actually suggesting that that a particular member be heard. And so we've seen that many, many times in the House, and it's certainly something that can be dealt with at committee as well. So just for the benefit of members on that. So go ahead, Mr. Housefather, please. Is this on a point of order, sir?
It is sort of,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I believe you've made a ruling on the issue of whether or not Mr. Baines should have the floor. And my understanding is that your ruling is no, he shouldn't, that you're allowed to go to either Mr. Barrett or Ms. Khalid or whoever would have the floor. I know I have to challenge that as soon as I can. I believe this is the first time I've had the opportunity, so I want to challenge that ruling, the ruling that you're not going to Mr. Baines on his point of privilege. That would be what I would challenge. Thank you.
In effect, what you're suggesting, and because you had a point of order, you can't move a motion. So the challenge is then to go to Mr. Baines first, based on the fact that we're dealing with a privilege motion. Again, Mr. Housefather, it goes down that pathway where the subjectivity of the selection process of hands needs to stay with the chair, but if that's what you're challenging and you're very clear on that, then I will accept the challenge in this particular case. But again, the responsibility of the chair is to deal with rules, procedure, regulations as they relate to the committee. The subjectivity of such selection of members to speak the chair needs to have that latitude, and the clerk certainly needs to have that latitude. So I'm hearing a little bit more clarity in what you're saying. So I am going to accept that you are asking that Mr. Baines be heard, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm basically saying that on a privilege motion, the floor should first go to Mr. Baines because he had a privilege motion that we should be coming back to.
So that's what you're challenging me on, sir. Okay. And I'm just gonna go to the clerk for a sec. So for clarity of all the members, what we are actually dealing with is that Mr. Housefather is challenging the chair's decision to not go to allow Mr. Baines to speak first on his question of privilege. Est-ce que tout le monde est clair?
Does everyone understand?
It's a challenge, so it's not subject to debate. So I'm going to allow. Do we have consensus on that? No. Okay. So we're gonna go. Sorry. The clerk is reminding me that the question becomes important then, right? Shall the decision of the chair be sustained in my determination that Mr. Barrett, or are you challenging me then, Mr. Housefather, that Mr. Baines has the floor, that the point of privilege becomes a priority, and that Mr. Baines should be given the floor? That's what you're challenging me on, correct?
Yes,
So
correct.
it's not a question of whether my decision is sustained to recognize Mr. Barrett?
No.
It's on this issue, okay.
It's a question of should Mr. Baines have the floor and challenging your ruling on that.
On
Yeah.
the matter of privilege?
Based on the matter of privilege,
Okay.
yes.
All right. All right, are you clear, Madam Clerk?
I'm clear.
Okay.
Clear for everybody?
So we don't have consensus, we're going to go to a vote on this.
All right. So, has everybody heard the terms of the motion? Tout le monde a compris le terme de la motion?
No, I didn't.
Everyone has understood the terms of the motion?
Twice.
Well, one more time, Chair.
I'll let you explain it.
So the question is to challenge the chair's decision and allow Mr. Baines the opportunity to speak, and that the question of privilege takes priority over any other matters. Am I correct in that, Mr. Housefather?
It is, Mr. Chair, but I think, again, the lack of clarity is, I believe the question is, should the ruling of the chair be sustained? That's the subject of it. But if you don't believe the ruling of the chair is sustained, you're voting no. And if you do sustain the ruling of the chair, you're voting yes. And I think that's where we're confused because we're meddling other questions.
But my ruling, to be clear, Mr. Housefather, was to give Mr. Barrett the floor, right? So the problem that we have is exactly what I said earlier. We could end up going down a pathway where every time the chair identifies somebody who he or the clerk believes has the floor, that can be challenged.
No, but Mr. Chair, I'm not challenging. What I think there's two different things. Whatever the question is, it should be. I understand the question is, shall the ruling of the chair be sustained? And if you don't agree, you vote no. That's, I think, where there's a confusion. What I've challenged is not that you gave the floor to Mr. Barrett. It's that a privilege motion should supersede anything else, and as a result, we had a privilege motion, and the floor should go to Mr. Baines. It's not challenging who you saw or didn't see first.
No, but I think that's what we're voting on. We're voting on the fact that you're challenging the fact that Mr. Baines that my decision to identify Mr. Barrett is not going to occur, and that you believe that the privilege motion should supersede. That I think everybody's clear on that. I think everybody is clear on that. I think we've said it 3 or 4 times that that's what you're challenging my decision on. So, okay. So,
Can we get that in writing?
You want that in writing?
Yes, please.
Okay. We're going to have to suspend in order to do that, Mr. Barrett. Okay. I'm going to, Ms. Khalid, you have a point of order. I'm going to come back to that after we have the request from Mr. Barrett to put that in writing. Okay. Mr. Brock, you have a point of order. Go ahead, sir.
Excuse me. And I do thank you for the indulgence that you've granted the committee. I know that we are well beyond 1 hour into our start time, but there's another option to consider to resolve the logjam that we find ourselves in moving the business of this committee forward. And it was referenced a couple of times on the last occasion, I believe, by MP Couric. And that's the issue regarding an apology. And I think the time has come that I make an unreserved apology to MP Parm Baines. It was one thing for me to repeat the evidence of former MP Kenny Chiu in relation to the evidence that he gave on his last appearance. But it was quite another for me to take those words and to take that message and to amplify it in such a way to justify expanding our study on misinformation and disinformation. So when I take a step back and reflect on the comments I made, Chair, on the occasion, I essentially spoke for close to 45 minutes. It certainly, from an independent observer, could come to a conclusion that I myself was amplifying a message in the same fashion that Kenny Chiu had accused MP Baines of doing. And for that, in my view, was unparliamentary, and I offer my unreserved apology to you, sir.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Brock. I appreciate that. We are still, I'm going to go to Mr. Baines right now. Mr. Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I sincerely say this, I think that it's extremely important that we continue to do the important work that this committee does do, and I do want to acknowledge and recognize Mr. Brock's apology, and I accept the apology. I think that the issue around misinformation and disinformation is far too important to then go on and continue to spread more misinformation and disinformation. So I appreciate the apology that Mr. Brock has given, and I accept it. withdraw my motion to take this matter to the House. Or the question of privilege that was on.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the interventions by both members. I do believe that the work of the committee is critically important as we near the end of the session. And I appreciate your words, Mr. Brock. I also appreciate your words and your offer to withdraw the motion. I do need unanimous consent to withdraw the motion. Do I have unanimous consent to withdraw the motion? I do. Okay, thank you. Now that takes me back to where we were at the beginning of the meeting. And I had acknowledged Mr. Barrett to start. And I'm going to go to Mr. Barrett. I've got Ms. Khalid, Mr. Fisher, and I see Mr. Cooper's hand up. So that's where we'll start. We are still in public, in committee business. We are checking on additional resources if they are needed. And I will advise when the clerk is aware of that. Mr. Barrett, go ahead, please.
Chair, I want to move the following motion. Following media reports and Minister Randy Boissinault's testimony on Tuesday, June 4th, the committee called the following witnesses to appear. Stephen Anderson, co-founder of Global Health Imports, Kristen Poon of Navis Group, Melvina Gowie, the Gowie Group LLC, and the other Randy referred to in Minister Randy Boissinault's testimony, who is formerly or currently employed at Global Health Imports. Chair, I've sent this motion in both official languages to the clerk for distribution. I'd like to make some brief comments on it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. We did have a motion that was presented at the last meeting. This has got some changes in it, from what I can tell, so I'm going to rule the motion in order, and I'm going to ask the clerk to distribute the motion to the members of the committee. So the motion is in order, it's on the floor, and I'm going to ask Mr. Barrett to start. Go ahead, sir. Yeah, it's coming now. It's coming now.
So, Chair, we've heard in global news reports about Minister Randy Boissinault, and these reports have raised concerns with respect to Minister Boissinault's involvement with Navis Group, which has lobbied the government for which he is a minister, and he received payments from that company during his time. This, of course, raises questions under the Lobbying Act and the Conflict of Interest Act. With respect to Global Health Imports, this is a company that Minister Randy Boissinault co-founded. He owns 50% of the company through an Alberta numbered company that he wholly owns. And he offered in his evidence at the last committee meeting that he believed that Stephen Anderson, his partner, is the only other shareholder in that company, that they are, in fact, partners. Global News this past week released text messages that refer to a Randy in the decision to solicit a $500,000 wire transfer, and this is now the subject of court proceedings. There are questions about fraud and wire fraud. And the minister asserted to the committee that at this small company that he co-founded, in spite of the fact that in these text messages, there's talk of a partner call and Randy, that it's another Randy, that he is not that Randy at the company. And so it's important. We had the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner here who testified that in spite of having sent a letter previously saying that an investigation wouldn't be pursued, that new concerns, new questions had been raised, and he would examine the matter and then undertake a self-initiated investigation should that need to occur. The Lobbying Commissioner is reviewing the matter, and of course, due to the potential for criminal code violations and Lobbying Act violations, the RCMP will have to review the issue to see if criminal charges need to be pursued. Look, this motion is germane to the work that the committee undertook at the last meeting. I think that we were all surprised by the reports in Global News. I think that that having these witnesses come forward to get clarity and provide Canadians with assurances that all of the rules, specifically the ones whose commissioners fall under the purview of this committee, the Lobbying Commissioner and the Ethics Commissioner with respect to the Lobbying Act and the Conflict of Interest Act and the Conflict of Interest Code for members, that all the rules have been followed, and if rules haven't been followed, then the committee and Canadians would be aware of that, and look forward to the expeditious passing of this motion so that we can get transparency for Canadians. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. On the motion, I've got Ms. Khalid, Mr. Fisher, and then Mr. Cooper. Go ahead, Ms. Khalid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, although this is not what I was expecting to speak on today, but I definitely will. You know, we just experienced in this committee an apology for defaming someone in this committee. And I really appreciated the recognition of that defamation. And I really, I've been on this committee for a couple of years now, Mr. Chair, and I have watched private citizens get hauled in here and be really rammed through the ringer on these issues that are pure speculation, that are based on conjecture, that are based on just, hey, we're going to make an accusation and then we're going to expect that that everyone follow through. It seems like guilty until proven innocent. And what that does, Mr. Chair, is that it puts people at risk. It questions their integrity, and it really does not help how we function as parliamentarians, as ministers in this place. And I think this specific motion is exactly the same. Are we going to drag in private citizens into this committee who have nothing to do with the Conflict of Interest Act, who have nothing to do with the Lobbying Code, and are going to shame them publicly for what? It is the minister who has a link to the Conflict of Interest Act, and the minister came in here and he spoke quite unequivocally about what he has and has not done, what he is responsible for, what he is not responsible for. And I don't think that we as a committee are in a position to go down that path. It is not helpful to who we are. It is not helpful to our democracy. It is absolutely not helpful to how we conduct ourselves as parliamentarians. I would like to think that we have integrity, but the way that this is being framed, the way that I have been watching constantly, consistently, my colleagues going through the ringer just because, it's not fair. And I do not want to watch private citizens go through that same thing. And I'm not sure why the Conservatives are so determined, Chair, to continue the character assassination and once again drag regular Canadians before committee to attack them and impugn them in order to get more social media clips. It's not helpful. It's not helpful to what we're trying to achieve here. I know the Conservatives are really clinging to this latest speculation about the minister being cleared by the Ethics Commissioner, because they know full well that the Ethics Commissioner looked into their previous allegations against the minister and they didn't find anything to cause an investigation. Mr. Barrett actually wrote the Ethics Commissioner, who is a neutral party, who is there to say whether or not there have been any violations of the Conflict of Interest Act. The Ethics Commissioner reviewed that letter and found no reason to look into this any further. So why are we using valuable committee time to continue this witch hunt? It makes no sense to me other than, just clickbait. The commissioner could not have been clearer at his testimony. He said explicitly that the minister, and I quote, complied with the rules under the Act and the Code. He reiterated in French, it appears that the minister has complied with the requirements of the Code and the Act with respect to matters relating to these companies, and therefore there is no need to proceed with a study. And I know how much the Conservatives give regard to our Ethics Commissioner. I think he's a great guy. He's come and appeared before our committee many, many times. And we always had the highest regard for him. But God forbid that his opinion deflect from the Conservative clickbait.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The Minister of Employment is under an ethical cloud with serious questions about whether he contravened the Conflict of Interest Act, the Lobbying Act, and may have contravened the Criminal Code. Let's look at the facts. First, the minister is connected to one Kirsten Poon. She is the minister's former business partner. She runs and owns a lobbying firm called Navis Group. Navis Group happens to pay the minister. The minister claims it's for work that he had done previously before being elected, except that he has also said that he has never done any work for Navis Group, which raises questions about why he is being paid by Navis Group. In any event, the minister was a junior minister of finance when Poon, his business partner, was lobbying not only this Liberal government, but this minister's own department. Twice, Ms. Poon lobbied officials in the minister's then department, and in the process secured more than $100 million in grants to her clients. This raises serious questions about the fact that the Minister of Employment was being paid by a firm that was lobbying his department and securing a sizable amount in the way of grants for her clients. Now, the minister has very selectively noted that the Ethics Commissioner is not opening an investigation, but when he was asked about whether he has received a similar response from the Lobbying Commissioner, of course he couldn't answer in the affirmative because the Lobbying Commissioner has indicated that she is looking into the issue of whether the minister contravened the Lobbying Act by the very fact that his business partner, someone who he was being paid from, was lobbying his department. And similarly, he could provide no assurance that the RCMP haven't opened an investigation. Certainly, there would seem to be some serious questions about whether the minister violated the Lobbying Act. But it doesn't end there. There are other issues, other ethical issues that this minister faces involving a company called Global Health Imports. It's a company that he and his then business partner, Stephen Anderson, founded shortly after Mr. Boissinault lost his seat in the 2019 election. This is a company that held itself out as selling PPE. Needless to say, it is a company that engaged in a whole host of shady business activities, including during the time that Mr. Boissinault held himself out as a partner at Navis Group. Indeed, the Alberta Court of King's Bench has awarded clients of Global Health Imports who have sued Global Health Imports $7.8 million in default judgments that have been ordered by Alberta courts. And Mr. Boissinault says that he has, since being elected, had nothing to do with Global Health Imports, aside from the fact that he owns a 50% interest in the company, which he is lawfully able to do. But now there are legitimate questions about whether that in fact is the case, or whether, on the contrary, the minister was involved in the business operations of Global Health Imports. And those questions arise from a Global News report in which text messages were reported on and leaked that indicate that there is a Randy involved in Global Health Imports. And it arises, the context of the text messages is in relation to a shady business deal that occurred in September of 2022. In September of 2022, Mr. Boissinault was a minister of the Crown, as he is today. And at issue is, as far as the text messages go, are with respect to a California-based client who was purchasing PPE from Global Health Imports. And that company ended up wiring over a $500,000 U.S. deposit to Global Health Imports. And there was some back and forth between Global Health Imports and the California-based client. And during that back and forth, there was a text message from Stephen Anderson, the partner, the other individual who I think owns 50% of the company, but holds himself out as the COO of Global Health Imports, who said to the California-based client, "What is going on? I just received this from Randy." And then there is a message from Randy to Anderson talking about how it was so critical that the California-based client deposit the $500,000 U.S. to Global Health Imports. Now, why is that significant or of concern? Well, first of all, if the minister was involved in any aspect of operating the business, as this Randy appears to be, in being involved in a wire transfer of $500,000 to Global Health Imports, someone who told Anderson in the text message, "Be available in 15 for a partner call," So a partner or someone who viewed himself as a partner at Global Health Imports, if that Randy happens to be the minister, then the minister plainly contravened the Conflict of Interest Act, because the Conflict of Interest Act provides that ministers may not be involved to serve as directors or to be involved in a business. They may have an ownership stake, but they may not be involved in those operations. So that's number one. Second of all, there is a lawsuit that is before the Alberta Court of King's Bench from the California-based client alleging, among other things, fraud by Global Health Imports with respect to its PPE purchase. The PPE was never delivered, and the deposit, the $500,000 deposit from Global Health Imports, was never returned. The case is fairly strong. I believe they even obtained an attachment order from the Alberta Court of King's Bench, which, among other things, in order to obtain, the court must be satisfied that there is a reasonable likelihood that the claim would be established. And the minister, and so it is a situation where if the Randy in the text message is the minister, then we have a minister who may have been involved in a transaction that involves fraud. And the minister has said, well, I'm not that Randy. It's some other Randy. Okay, well, you might say, well, there could be a lot of Randys, except when we look at the minister, he was previously a partner of Global Health Imports. In the text messages, he's telling the COO, Anderson, be available in 15 for a partner call. He has a 50% stake in the company. That's a pretty significant stake in a company. The company, Global Health Imports, is not a big company. When the minister appeared before a committee, he admitted that it comprises of a handful of people. It appears there are only 4 or 5 people that are involved in Global Health Imports. So the question is, who is this Randy? Who is a partner at this 4 or 5 person company? It shouldn't be that difficult to track down who this other Randy is. But this other Randy can't be tracked down. The COO, Mr. Anderson, said there is some other Randy. It's not the minister, but he couldn't really remember his last name. This being his business partner who's telling him be available in 15 for a partner call involving a wire transfer of $500,000 US. He can't remember his last name, can't say who it is. He said this Randy, who doesn't have a last name, was involved in logistics, except when Global News looked into who is involved in logistics at Global Health Imports, it turns out to be Stephen Anderson's father, Edward Anderson. So his story doesn't add up. On top of it, not adding up that this Randy doesn't have a last name, or he never knew what it was. Global News tried to track down this other Randy. They couldn't track him down. The minister says it's not him, but he has provided no explanation as to who this other Randy could be, and hasn't accounted for that and his strong connection to this Global Health Imports company, including owning half of it. It wouldn't be very difficult for Minister Boissinault to pick up the phone or text Stephen Anderson and say, who is the other Randy? But I guess Stephen Anderson wouldn't be able to help him because Stephen Anderson can't remember his last name. It is absolutely farcical. It's absolutely farcical. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. It simply is a matter of common sense to realize that the reason that Randy Boissinault can't track down the other Randy is because there is no other Randy. It is the Minister of Employment. And unless this mysterious Randy suddenly shows up, then we have a minister who contravened the Conflict of Interest Act, and we have a minister who is mired in a business transaction that is facing serious allegations of fraud, a lawsuit that the California-based client even obtained an attachment order from the Alberta Court of King's Bench based on the strength of its action against the Global Health Imports Company. And so we need answers. It's not good enough for the minister to come here and say it's some other Randy that no one can find in the face of text messages from someone who was his former business partner, who he has involving a company that he has a 50% interest in, and that has only a handful of people who work there. So I would say highly suspicious, and on that basis, it is important that this committee get to work, call Stephen Anderson, Kirsten Poon, the California-based client, and let's find out who the other Randy is. Let's find out who the other Randy is. I'd like to see this mysterious other Randy. I think the clerk's going to have a real tough time tracking him down. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I'm looking at some documents on my phone here, Mr. Chair. Mr. Boissinault was in Vancouver. Everybody knows that Mr. Boissinault was in Vancouver at the time because there was a cabinet retreat. He provided us of his phone records from that day. He contacted TELUS. TELUS gave Mr. Boissinault the information for all of the calls on September 8, 2022. I'm seeing here a record of a call at 8:08 a.m., 11:05 a.m., 11:07, 11:12, 5:37, 5:39, 5:56, 7:52, 7:56, and 8:03 p.m. All these phone calls form the complete record of calls as provided by TELUS, and there were no calls to or from Mr. Boissinault that would involve Mr. Boissinault's alleged implication within this company.
Yes?
Go ahead on your point of order, Mr. Barrett.
So it's been an observance by government members at this committee that unless documents are properly received by the chair and the clerk and circulated in both official languages, that they not be entered into evidence, even if shared as a matter at hand at the committee. And so incomplete records or records from one of multiple phones, it's irrelevant. And it's also documents that are shared with some members of the committee. It's not appropriate unless these have been properly distributed to all members, including our members who aren't regular members but are participating today.
So I do appreciate that. And we did deal with this, I recall, when the RCMP commissioner was here. It has been the practice in the past, Mr. Housefather, that any information that's been received has been shared with the committee. I can assure you that first and foremost, we're in receipt of the correspondence from Mr. Boissinault. It's in translation right now, and it will be distributed when that translation is complete. So The difficulty for other members, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, is that they don't have access to the same information that you have at this point. So until that information is shared, I'd ask, sir, if you would just sort of hold off on what you're referring to, because I think in fairness to the committee, that's the appropriate course of action. So
on that point of order, Mr. Chair,
go ahead.
Are the things that are being said during debate on this motion considered testimony or evidence? That's not the same as when you have a witness before you sharing things that the committee's not privy to. This is debate. I will tell you that next to nothing that Mr. Cooper said in his entire speech is something that I had.
Now you're into debate.
Duly sent to the committee clerk by a minister and has not been translated and sent to all members of the committee.
And I've made my position clear, and I'm going to ask that you respect that, Mr. Housefather, that this information is going to be shared in both official languages very shortly, I hope. And then it won't put members on their back heels of the fact that you've got information that they don't have. This was sent to the clerk. It was sent by the minister for distribution. It hasn't been distributed yet. If you have access to something that the other committee members don't have access to, I'm just going to ask that you hold off on it until we're able to get it in their hands, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chair, although given that this is relevant to a motion that was raised today at the committee, then why are we debating a motion without having this actually in front of us? You cannot argue that we're going to rush and put forward a motion and negate evidence that was brought to us by the minister that was actually requested by the Conservative members at the last meeting, and then say I can't refer to it to say that I oppose the motion they're putting forward to bring witnesses to the committee. So that to me is actually not a reasonable prospect, Mr. Chair. So I move to adjourn debate on this motion until such time as Mr. Boissinault's documents are translated and sent to the committee.
All right. We have a motion to adjourn debate, and I would ask whether we have consensus to adjourn debate. We do not. So I'm going to ask the clerk to take the roll. Then the motion is to adjourn debate.
Motion to adjourn the debate. Mr. Baines.
Yes.
Ms. Diab. Thumbs up, yes. Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
Mr. Housefather.
Yes.
Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Brett.
No.
Mr. Dodal.
No.
Mr. Kmich.
No.
Monsieur Villemur.
No.
Mr. Green.
No.
Yeas 5, nays 5.
And I vote no.
Yeas 5, nays 6.
Okay, so the motion is defeated. And
Point of order. I wasn't asked for my vote. Is that appropriate that I be skipped?
Is Mr. What's his name again? Longfield? Longfield. Is Mr. Longfield on the list?
At this point, I called Ms. Diab and Ms. Thompson.
Ms. Diab and Ms. Thompson were on our list, but just hang on a sec.
I may be losing track of the many substitutions. Let me, if there's a latest substitution, let me verify.
Well, just on point of order, Chair, would that change the outcome of the vote if
I don't have the information in front of me for the debate either, so of course I wouldn't vote for this.
So it's not going to change the result of the vote. We had Ms. Diab and Ms. Thompson as subbed in. They both voted on the motion, so it's not going to change the result of the vote. Mr. Green, I do see your hand. I assume that you want to be on the speaking list, sir?
This is the point of order on the ability to reference documents that have been received. I would agree that that it is not testimony. There are all types of ways in which communications could have happened, whether it was a personal phone or whether it was a government phone or God knows what. We haven't determined that, but I do think procedurally it would be appropriate for the members of any members of this committee, including the government side, to be able to reference a document that is in circulation. I do think that is appropriate.
Okay, well,
Until we can get that distributed to the committee, it's numbers, doesn't need to be translated as much because it's all phone numbers, right?
yeah, there's, the clerk has assured me that it'll be very soon, because it's a smaller document to translate. So I'm going to accept that, Mr. Fisher. I want to make sure that everybody has this in their hands, so I am going to suspend for a couple of minutes until we have it in your hands. Mr. Longfield, we'll come back. Your hand is still up, I assume?
Chair,
Yeah.
before you drop the gavel, we're 26 minutes from question period. You're going to suspend, but
yeah,
the duration isn't clear.
Well,
right?
we said till 2 o'clock, or just before 2. That's what I said.
Okay.
So we're going to suspend for a couple of minutes. When we last left, we were on an amendment to a motion. The amendment was put forward by Mr. Barrett, and the amendment says that the committee order Global Health Imports to submit the names of all past and present employees in order to reveal the identity of the other Randy referred to by Minister Randy Boissinault within 7 days of this motion being adopted. And I do have a list. I intervened when Ms. Khalid had the floor. So we'll start with Ms. Khalid. We'll then go to Ms. Damoff, Mr. Green, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Barrett, and then Monsieur Villemure. Okay, so Ms. Khalid, go ahead. On the amendment.
Thank you very much, Chair. I really appreciate that. And I may not have the eloquence of speaking the way that Mr. Barrett does, and I may not have the litigation experience that Mr. Brock does, but one thing I do have, Chair, is decency. I really would not do to my colleagues what my colleagues do to me, and I know that yesterday Mr. Barrett posted a clip of me on social media taking completely out of context what I was saying. So I would like to, for the record, just reiterate what it was that I was trying to get across. And that is, in this committee, we are tasked with a certain thing, and we need to bring it tighter in together. Sure, if the Conservatives have allegations to make, let's bring that in here, and that's what this motion is about. But what I do not appreciate is the dehumanization of members of this committee, of private citizens that I've seen in the past come in here and be faced with just allegations. Let's also remember, Chair, that on September 8, 2022, Minister Boissinault was in Vancouver attending a cabinet retreat with wall-to-wall meetings where ministers lock up their cell phones on a day that was especially hectic because it was the day that Queen Elizabeth II had passed away. May she rest in peace. This was real evidence, Mr. Chair, but the Conservatives are just disregarding it to the point where Mr. Cooper has ridiculously suggested that the minister had some kind of burner phone that he used. Like, how conspiratorial can we actually get here? So the question is, are they going to accept to see the evidence? Let's see. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would like to move a sub-amendment to Mr. Barrett's amendment as proposed yesterday to say that the committee deleting the words, order Global Health Imports to submit the names of all past and present employees in order to reveal the identity of the other quote-unquote Randy referred to by Minister Randy Boissinault, and replace those words with request that Stephen Anderson produce for the committee all of his phone records and text messages from September 8, 2022, and to keep the words at the end within 7 days of this motion being adopted.
It is in order because it's in relation to finding out who Randy is, potentially. So we are on the sub-amendment by Ms. Khalid. So I've got Mr. Green first, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Kirk. Go ahead, Mr. Green, on the sub-amendment, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And you're quite right. I think the heart of the matter of where we're at right now is trying to find out who this Randy is, the person I affectionately call the alibi Randy. And there's been lots of kind of bizarre twists and turns of this committee just trying to get to the heart of the matter when, quite frankly, whether it was the minister or the company in question, and I respect that the minister would have to say, of course, that he wouldn't have any knowledge of anybody inside this company. But we've heard arguments from the governing side here, from the Liberal Party, that somehow disclosing this information is a grave violation of privacy, that it, of course, is what has been equated to some kind of circus. But I would say in this particular case, the circus is of the minister's making. This is a company, just to recap, millions of dollars in contracts, something like $8 million, allegations of fraud, which, to my understanding, publicly reported, haven't been even defended. And then, just the whole structure of the way in which a minister has such a close relationship to this day, it doesn't pass the smell test, quite frankly. And really all of this, and I'll say it again, could have been avoided if the real Randy just stood up. If the company just said, this is Randy, this is what Randy does, this is Randy's contract, it would have all gone away. And now to go down some rabbit hole about phone records, while I think maybe the use of the term burner phone perhaps may come off a bit dramatic, the truth is it would be expected that a minister would have, it would be expected that most members of parliament would have their own personal phone lines. Of course they would, because you wouldn't want to conduct anything personal or non-business related, on your cabinet cell phone. So I'm unwilling to accept all of the drama, around time zones and cabinet retreats and fairway boxes and all of these different types of things. I'm simply interested in finding out officially who this Randy is. Who is Alibi Randy? Because absent of Alibi Randy, I would say the minister has dug himself into quite a hole here. And on the surface of it, he lacks credibility in his testimony. On the surface of it, the stories that have been reported, which are publicly reported, have not yet been refuted, I think, in a meaningful way, that a minister would even want to be tangentially related and connected to a company as nuclear as this in this moment seems beyond my understanding. Wouldn't answer basic questions about payouts, was obstructionist, obfuscated what I think were very straightforward questions. And for that reason, we're in this point. And I actually, I would have liked to have heard from the Gowie company. I would have liked to heard from all the witnesses to get to the heart of the matter, because if it is the case that this story, as convoluted and bizarre as it is unfolding, was technically legally allowed, we have problems. Because the average person, the objective person on the outside looking at this, given the facts that have been reported, given the lack of any kind of, I think, substantive defense by the minister and by this company, I think it puts it all at risk, quite frankly. And anytime there's a scandal in this committee, I believe the general public, they don't discern necessarily about whether it's liberal, conservative bloc, or New Democrat. In their minds, I believe they just They just see all politicians as being corrupt. And that kind of broad brush, we've heard it today in the arguments from the Liberal side, that they're now being pulled into this. Why? Why are you allowing yourselves to be pulled into this mess when it's not your mess? You are not receiving deferred payments from this company. You do not have a 50% interest in a company that had almost $8 million in contracts, and as I understand, are being pursued for various allegations of fraud. That's not your mess. So why you're kind of, putting in the extra overtime work to try to make this go away doesn't make sense to me as a New Democrat. And while I appreciate the way in which social media, personal attacks, ad hominem attacks, information that's taken out of context has a direct impact on the way we do our business, this simply could have been solved absent of the filibuster last meeting, with straightforward answers, and with a minister who was willing to take responsibility and accountability for the role and involvement that they had in this company, whether or not they were in contact with them. Because what we have to do as a committee when this is done, hopefully, is provide recommendations to close whatever gaps and loopholes seem to exist and that are present here. So for that reason, Mr. Chair, I certainly will not be supporting this amendment.
Go ahead, Ms. Demo, please.
It's difficult to have a conversation, Chair, when I'm just going to say I think that we need to be respectful. And, to Mr. Barrett's point about us not liking being interrupted, the issues that I have are when clips are taken, especially when they're taken out of context and put on Twitter, which I'm quite certain has driven horrific traffic to Ms. Khalid over, why do I keep saying your name wrong, Ikra? I'm sorry, Ms. Khalid. So anyway, I'm supportive of what has been put forward by Ms. Khalid.
I think that there's just a couple of things I wanted to say. First of all, the Ethics Commissioner had told us that he had felt that there was nothing further to investigate on issues other than now the new question of who Randy is in these text messages. So I agree. The one question the committee needs to actually understand is who is the Randy in the text messages. I think everyone here on all sides is unaware of the answer to that. We all have our own presumptions, our own ideas, but what's happening is people are now speculating idly, and the real question is, how do you find out? So to me, Mr. Barrett's original proposal calls for the company to release the names of all of the different employees. Who is to say that this Randy is an employee of the company? Randy could be a consultant. Randy could be somebody else. So Mr. Barrett's proposal doesn't resolve the question of who Randy is by simply producing a list of employees. You could argue that it's overbreadth to produce all the employees. To me, the answer is to ask the company, who is Randy? Ask Mr. Anderson, who is Randy? Ask Mr. Anderson these questions. So to me, the list of employees was irrelevant. The question to ask the company is, who is Randy? At least Ms. Khalid's sub-amendment requires Mr. Anderson to produce his text messages for that day, and we'll see what number this comes from. And presumably from at least the text messages that Mr. Anderson put out on September the 8th, we'll have all of these answers. So I prefer Ms. Khaled's sub-amendment to the original amendment, because the original amendment doesn't actually necessarily tell us who Randy is, because it provides a list of employees from this company, and nobody is to say that Randy was an employee. He could have been a consultant, or she could have been a consultant. We don't even know if it's a guy.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate Mr. Housefather's intervention. He makes a very compelling case to call Mr. Anderson as a witness. That was the intention, and we end up down these other rabbit holes, right? So I am for that. I just want to ask you, Mr. Chair, and I've kind of lost track between the sub-amendments and amendments. Where are we with that? Have we now, based on the last votes, removed our ability to call any witnesses, and we're now just relying on this, or does that still exist?
No,
the original motion?
So the main motion called for, was amended and still calls for two witnesses to be called, Mr. Anderson and Ms. Poon.
Of questions to Mr. Anderson, when asked if he worked with another Randy, Anderson stated that he did, but would not disclose the employee's full name. He said the other Randy was head of logistics. So I do want to note that. We do have a challenge when we're looking for records from this company, I think. It's not because of the size of the company, a handful of employees. But of course, there is the matter of the fire. There is the matter of the fire that may cause a challenge for us in getting records from the company. Because on September 25th, 2022, GHI Edmonton's unit was set ablaze. And detectives working alongside Edmonton Fire Rescue Services determined that the fire had been deliberately set following a break and enter to the premises, destroying inventory and records. So this of course preceded the lawsuits that followed with GHI, and of course the Gowie Group made a $7.3 million claim for loss and damages. Now, there is the claim on the missing money, the outstanding money, that the intention from GHI was that they would pay Gowie back with insurance money, and we're unsure about if there had been if the deposit was used to procure product or what had taken place there. But many questions abound after that fire, including if they have a list of their employees. But the public reporting is that Alibi Randy, is an employee. But I think that to just capture it all, yes, let's ask for contractors, subcontractors, consultants, employees who are named Randy. Simply getting phone records and not other Randy is a problem, because other Randy and Mr. Anderson, we don't know the application that they were using for communication. There's too many messaging apps that are in common use to enumerate, but or to list, to itemize, I should say, but we don't know. And simply because someone ought not use their phone for something that it is therefore excluded from the interest of the committee in getting an answer, like that's not sufficient. So we would need to see messages from all messaging apps, and we would need to see call logs from all calling apps for both Mr. Anderson and the minister, Randy, as part of our inquiry into who the other Randy is. But that's not a conclusion. And certainly having Mr. Anderson come before committee to answer questions, Mr. Anderson would be forewarned that question one is the first and last name of other Randy, or Randeep, Alibi Randy. We need to know. So that's going to be question one. So of course Mr. Anderson must come to the committee, but we need answers to our questions. An exhaustive review of communications logs from all telecommunication devices owned by Mr. Anderson is the only way to give credibility to this question here. And barring that expansion, then we can't support this. Like, look, we've gone from having Gowie Group, Anderson, Poon, and other Randy come to committee to just to eliminating the subject of the messages, the third party, to eliminating other Randy, which is the question in front of us, and now there's the suggestion that we'll get these messages. We're going to amend the motion to get messages from one device and potentially eliminate the call for the other two witnesses. Come on. That dog's not going to hunt. We're going to need to see all messages, all call logs, all devices owned by Mr. Anderson, and the same for the minister. That's if we're going to follow this thread on devices, it needs to be complete. That's what Mr. Brock asked for, and the clerk might not have sent a note to the minister, but he was here, he heard the request, and he also had a gaggle of staff with him who I'm certain minuted the request, and I'm sure that they watched the game tape after and saw that the request was there. And the one phone just isn't sufficient. It just isn't sufficient that what went through his wireless provider is it. I can say with a great deal of certainty that almost everyone in this room, members and strangers, use applications for messaging other than the native messaging app on their phone. Wicker, WhatsApp, here we go, let's name some. I know people use Facebook Messenger often. I find that surprising, but to each their own. People DM on Instagram. Snapchat. I don't know. I don't think people use it to instant message, but there's an app called Be Real that people really like. So there's lots, but Skype, Teams, Zoom, people will make calls on those as well. People will instant message on those. So a variety of encrypted and unencrypted messaging apps, and they're quite common in government, in politics, in military and civilian applications. So it's just really a half-hearted in its current form, and so we'd need more meat on those bones because this thing has been pared down so much. We've gotten away from the penultimate question, who is other Randy?
We, in our original motion, wanted a representative Galway here because they are part of this and they have a different perspective and a different interest. They're not here to protect Minister Boissinault. Quite frankly, they want to get paid back the money that they lost or the product that they originally contracted for. They're out of pocket. So they reached out, or the reporter reached out to Galway. And I'm going to read out this passage in the press release because I think it's quite telling. It was Galway's understanding during that text message that I referenced on September the 8th that Anderson was referring to Boissinault, Minister Boissinault. Not an intern, not an employee, not a consultant, not GC Strategies, not McKinsey, Minister Boissinault, whom Anderson had told her, previous conversation, Chair, Anderson had told her was a partner in GHI and, wait for it, a public official. Not only confirming Minister Boissinault's partnership status, but also his political status. A public official. This was confirmed by Galway. They confirmed, we have had no direct communication with Mr. Boissinault at any point in our dealings with Stephen. Well, of course not. He's not that naive to physically pick up the phone and write directly to Galway. He's going to do that through back channels. He's going to deal with that through his partner, Mr. Anderson. So Anderson, again, was asked further questions, would not respond regarding any of the nuances towards the towards the text. Then the story goes on and talks about how GHI has been embroiled in lawsuits, even though Mr. Boissinault, Randy Boissinault, the minister, was listed as director of the company for more than a year after his re-election. Now going back to Galway, so it looks like as a result of the intervention of either the minister or the other Randy, they ended up later that day sending nearly $500,000 as a deposit to Anderson. Company says it never got the gloves it was contractually promised, and all that money was stolen. Mr. Anderson and GHI deny that claim, and coincidentally and suspiciously, 16 days after Galway wires the deposit, a fire breaks out that the police say was deliberately set after a break and enter, and all product, including records, including all invoices, literally gone up in smoke. The author of the report opines why a former politician, referencing the minister, and a hockey coach, referencing Mr. Anderson, launched a PPE business in the industry's most tumultuous time remains a mystery. However, court documents and interviews with suppliers and buyers who did business with GHI reveal the inner workings of a startup fraught with problems from the start. In lawsuits against GHI dating back to 2021, suppliers claim the company did not pay for products they delivered. On May the 3rd, the minister told Global News, "When I was running the company, all of the bills were paid," quote unquote. Court documents dispute that statement. A lawsuit filed by supplier Patterson Dental against GHI about 2 weeks after Boissinault's re-election claims the company did not pay 15 invoices between November 2020 and January 2021, totaling just under $400,000. And I think, sir, that I made my point in terms of evidence versus politics versus conjecture. This is not a witch hunt. This is a function that any opposition member, particularly at this committee, would want to do, determine who this other Randy is. That is the $64 million question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brock. I've exhausted the list on the sub-amendment. So do we have consensus on the sub-amendment to adopt it? No. No, we don't? Okay, so I'm going to call...
Sorry, I think Mr. Villemur's gone to the bathroom. Oh, he's back.
Yep. Okay, so we are on the sub-amendment vote. We've exhausted the speaking list on that. We don't have consensus. Madam Clerk, go ahead with the vote, please.
On the sub-amendment moved by Ms. Khalid, Mr. Baines.
Yes.
Ms. Damoff.
Yes.
Mr. Fisher.
Oui.
Mr. Hauswater.
Yes.
Ms. Khalid.
Yes.
Mr. Barrett.
Nope.
Mr. Brock.
No.
Mr. Kirk.
No.
Monsieur Villemur.
Ooh.
Mr. Green.
No.
Yeas 6 pour 6, nays 4 contre 4.
Okay, so the sub-amendment does carry. We're back on the amendment for the motion. Do we have any speakers on the amendment? as amended. Ms. Damoff, go ahead.
I thought the amendment carried yesterday, so now we would be on the main motion, Chair. Am I confused here?
Just give me a second here.
I could be wrong.
Yeah, So just to confirm, and thanks the clerk for this, the bloc did move an amendment. Mr. Desilets, who was here, that was adopted. And then Mr. Barrett moved an amendment, which led to the sub-amendment, which was just adopted. So we're on the amendment to the motion as amended. Does that make sense?
Chair, could you read the motion in its current form for us?
And I'll not be able to do it out of my head, but we will just give me a second here. Madam Clerk, you're on top of this, I know. Can you?
Do you want me to read or distribute?
I would rather you read. Okay.
Maybe both.
And distribute. Yeah.
Well,
I'm not sure exactly where we are right now.
I will read, then distribute, because I cannot talk and distribute at the same time. There we go. So, give me a second there. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Randy's getting away.
Thank you. So sorry about the noise in the room and all that. Thank you, the analyst, for that. So the text of the motion, as amended now twice, would read that in light of media report, Minister Randy Boissinault testimony at this committee and the Ethics Commissioner's confirmation that he is considering opening another investigation into Minister Randy Boissinault's action, the committee call on the following witnesses to appear before the committee and testify for 1 hour. A. Stephen Anderson. B. Kristen Poon. And now we're getting to the motion as amended, that the committee requests that Stephen Anderson produce for the committee all of his phone records and text messages from September 8, 2022, within 7 days of this motion being adopted.
So that's where we're at right now. So I'll take a couple of minutes. I'm gonna allow the clerk to put it all together and send it out to committee members, and we are going to suspend for a couple of minutes so that you can have a look at this. Please.
Chair, I'd like to move an amendment. So where the motion reads, and that the committee requests that Stephen Anderson and Randy Boissinault would be added. Produce for the committee all of his, we would replace with the word their, phone records and text messages, and add iMessages and all instant messages, and calls from all applications from September 8th, 2022, within 7 days of this motion being adopted.
Has that been shared? Have you shared that with the clerk at this point? Okay, so you're gonna have to repeat that very, very, very slowly, Mr. Barrett.
If
you don't mind, or
I'll send it to the clerk.
Okay, so send it to the clerk if you don't mind. Thanks. We have resources till 1:30, so I'm going to have to suspend because I'm going to need it distributed to all the members of the committee in both languages. So we are going to suspend again. Of everyone, but the clerk has sent the sub-amendment proposed by Mr. Barrett to everyone, and the sub-amendment would read, and the committee requests that Stephen Anderson and Randy Boissinault produce for the committee all of their phone records, text messages, iMessages and all instant messages and call logs for all applications from September 8th, 2022, within 7 days of this motion being adopted. Mr. Barrett. Okay. Ms. Damoff.
Thanks, Chair. We won't be supporting the amendment. I will remind the committee that the committee already asked Mr. Boissinault for his phone records. And Chair, I wanted to just read what happened that day because there was no follow-up. You said, "Thank you, Mr. Green. On that, I'm going to ask the clerk on your behalf, sir, to review the Hansard, to submit the questions that have been asked of Mr. Boissinault and have him respond to the committee. Madam Clerk, just make a note of the time on that." And then you said, "Thank you, sir. I'm going to take that as a request from Mr. Brock, and again, I'm going to ask the clerk to follow up on that request." Mr. Boissinault is attempting to get the records for his ministerial phone. It's not as easy as submitting the records from his personal phone, which he proactively submitted to the committee. So we won't support the amendment from Mr. Barrett, and I hope that this doesn't turn into a fishing expedition, that we can deal with this motion this afternoon and move on. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Damoff. I don't have anybody else on the speaking list on the sub-amendment. Mr. Barrett?
I'm just wondering if we can do a sound check with Mr. Green there, Mr. Chair.
I mean, his sound was fine before.
Mr. Green is actually not sitting.
He's not in his chair.
The chair is empty.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Mr. Green, good to have you back. We see you. Wonderful. Okay. So I don't have anybody else on the speaking list, so I'm going to call the vote on Mr. Barrett's sub-amendment if we don't have consensus. We don't have consensus. Okay. Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Vote is on the sub-amendment from Mr. Barrett. Mr. Baines.
No.
Ms. Damoff.
No.
Mr. Fisher.
No.
Mr. Hausfather.
No.
Ms. Kelly.
No.
Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Mr. Brock.
Yes.
Mr. Kurek.
Yes.
Monsieur Villemur.
Oui.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Yeas 5, 9, 5.
And I vote yes.
Yeas 6, nays 5.
So the sub-amendment carries. We are now on the amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment? I don't see any. So on the amendment, do we have consensus on the amendment? Do we have consensus on the amendment? On division? On division? Okay. Okay, so we have division. That's fine. Okay, so that carries. And now we are on the main motion as amended. Okay. Did you want to speak on the main motion, Mr. Fisher? Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I spoke at length on and shared my thoughts on how I disagreed with bringing people before this committee, regular Canadians, through to the front of this committee and having them interrogated and have them potentially receive vitriolic social media feedback and hyper-partisan questions at committee. But I'm going to support the motion. I feel that, and I've talked about how committees can do really, really good work, and how I've been disappointed in the fact that committees have sort of gone down a real partisan road. But I do see the last 3 days of hard work by all parties and all parliamentarians here to get to a point, and I'm willing to accept that there is some form of consensus with all the work that's been done. So although I've said very regularly that I'm not in support of bringing regular Canadians before this committee to face what I really hope isn't going to be a firing squad, but due to the hard work the committee has put in, I'll support this motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fisher. I don't see any further discussion on this, so I'm going to ask that we have consensus on, do we have consensus on the main motion as amended? You want to call the roll? Okay. So I'm going to get Madam Clerk to call the roll. Madam Clerk, go ahead, please.
The vote is on the main motion as amended. Mr. Baines.
Yes.
Ms. Damoff.
Yes.
Mr. Fisher.
Wait.
Mr. Hauswater.
Oui.
Ms. Khalid.
Yes.
Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Mr. Brock.
Yes.
Mr. Currick.
Yes.
Monsieur Fortin.
Oui.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Yeas 10 pour 10.
Okay, so the motion as amended carries. Mr. Barrett, I see your hand. Go ahead.
I'd like to move to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. Do I have consensus? Mr. Green, I see your thumb up. Monsieur Fortin, wait. Okay, we are adjourned.